three. My guests today are Isimbi and Terry. I'm going to let them introduce themselves as they come into the studio.
Good
Good
morning.
morning
Good
and
morning.
welcome to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Terry Floyd. I am a behavioral scientist, mindset coach, published author, and speaker who specializes or utilizes a holistic approach of inspiring, educating, uplifting, and empowering the Black community where we can thrive together.
Awesome. My name is Simbi, and I'm a recent master's graduate in gender studies, and I do research as well on the side that focuses on sexual health on the African continent, as well as beyond that within Black communities. Yeah, thank you.
Are you complete, Cindy?
Sorry?
I was asking if you were complete.
Yes, yes, I just completed. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Terry? Okay. I'm going to start off by talking about travel. As we get on our airplane to travel, one of the things that an air hostess will say to you is if you're traveling with someone else, especially children, to put on your gas because you never know what can happen. And you know that if you don't take care of you first, you can't take care of the persons that you're taking care of.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
So,
it.
with that, I'm going to jump right in and I'm going to ask you to define self care and why do you practice self care? I'm going to start with
Okay.
Terry first.
And I definitely love that analogy, especially when you're traveling on the plane. The definition of self care to me is to practice doing holistic work on self and to be the best person that I can be inside and out. The reason why I practice it is because, first, for my son, my family, as well as myself, to make sure that I'm being like the best person possible or the best version of myself for them. Because in order for me to really be the best version of myself for my son, it especially, I need to make
Mhm.
sure that I'm taking care of myself first. You can't pour from an empty cup. So, yeah.
Definitely, definitely. I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, I really believe in how you are within yourself really propels you. So it starts with self, and this is why there's such importance in this matter. Yeah.
If I hear you correctly, it starts with self, and therefore self care is very important, especially as a caregiver.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you have to maintain your center of balance.
Mm-hmm.
My next question, and um, self care has become a romanticized buzzword term.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it glamorized, vision, problematic when needing to address deeper aspects such as emotional, psychological, and spiritual self care?
Um, I think that this is such a key factor today just because self care tips have expanded, and they're being portrayed within social media. They're being displayed as memes, and they're being displayed within Facebook posts, that it's not becoming a real discussion anymore. No one is seeming to you know see it as something that you really need to talk about. You can find it online, kind of thing. So I think that's where glamorization is an issue. I don't know if anyone sees it this way as well.
I agree. It's definitely, I feel like the social media, internet, even the discussions or television things that you see on TV, where they focus on like more so the outward appearance, such as massages, having spa day,
Mm,
doing manis and petties.
mm,
And it teaches us to still kind of continue to put on a mask. I
definitely.
know even with the pandemic, we've had to wear masks and everything to keep ourselves safe.
Mm,
But this glamorization of self-care helps us to like not confront the actual issues that we need to cover,
definitely.
that we need to
Definitely.
unreveal or remove the mask from. And so we put on this front, say, oh, I did my self-care, but when we go home, we're still struggling. So
Yeah.
I feel like you said, that we don't really confront the real
So
issue.
if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that very often that self-care is just superficial. It is just let me feel happy for the moment, but not really addressing the deeper
Definitely.
Yes.
challenges that are going on psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally. Get my nails done, I can go
Yeah.
shopping
Yeah.
and feel good in the moment, but I haven't addressed
Right.
the issue.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that being said, with the many different forms of self-care, why is it so important that we focus on redefining and reimagine and reimagining self-care practices for Black people, especially women
Mm,
of color?
I think because Black women, we struggle with taking care of self first. We look at it as
Either one can answer.
okay. We look at it as a way of if we take care of ourselves first or we choose ourselves first and we're being selfish. We
mm,
have this superwoman complex that will take care of everyone else and neglect ourselves. And so I know that it's important. Even with myself, I had to practice that and realize that if I don't take care of self,
mm,
I
mm.
cannot take care of anyone else. Kind of how I mentioned earlier about why I practice self-care for my 6-year-old. I'm like, he's a
Yeah.
child. He doesn't know what grown-up issues are. But at the
Yeah.
same time, for me to be the best version, I have to make sure that I'm filling my cup before I can pour it out and help other people. So I think it's important that we know what's important. While yes, we're there to help our families, we're caregivers and everything, it's still important to take care of self first.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think for this question in specific, I personally was very excited to discuss
Yeah,
it because
I can agree with that.
we have.
Women tend to. Oh,
No,
sorry.
don't worry. Please go ahead.
Go
Um,
ahead.
Yeah, no, what I was saying is that with Black culture, especially with Black women in specific, we have this huge narrative
I
of
see.
being a strong Black woman,
Mhm.
and silencing the pain, because I'm not meant to cry,
Mhm.
and I'm not meant to just show my emotion, because it kind of diminishes me and diminishes my strength as a Black woman. So I think that it's so highly vital to break this storyline for the Black woman, and just allow, expression, allow emotion to kind of enter that space. So self care definitely needs to be redefined for the Black woman and for the Black community as a whole. Yeah.
Can you explain that when you say it definitely needs to be redefined? Redefined in what way?
So I think just, sorry. No, so I think just allowing for this whole discussion of how, culturally, from our mothers and our
Okay.
grandmothers, when you did cry, it was you were told to calm down. You were told you're overreacting. So I think just creating a new safe space, for Black women and allowing women to expose their emotion, not bringing other women down within our community when emotion is shown, and yeah, just allowing it, changing the narrative, if it be on social media, if it be
Okay, I
within,
understand what you're saying because
yeah,
I know for being as a parent of all girls, it
yeah,
is always about holding it together,
Mhm.
mm,
you know.
mm,
So I understand to some extent what you're saying. Hold it together.
yeah,
You can't show weakness
Mhm.
because you want your girls to be
mm, mm,
strong, to be able to handle any challenge without breaking.
yeah, yeah,
So I understand that, and I think it's generational where this is passed on from one generation to the other,
definitely,
you know.
Yes.
But in as much as we say that, we as women usually have our little groups of other females that we whose shoulder we cry on, who we
mm,
really go on belly ache to, this is happening. And we find, at least for me, let me speak for myself, I have those channels, those females I can say, well, look, this is going on in my life, and we can have that conversation. And I find that helps.
mm.
Even though it may not be at a professional
It
level, I
Mm.
does.
find that
No, it
helps.
does. It really does. Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, yeah. I think for me, it was just. I mean,
So the word new
yeah.
age just came up, and new age self care individualizes rather than collectivizes mentality and practices of self care for Black women, for Black healing, sorry, liberation, wellness, and unity. Why is this detrimental to the Black health, to Black mental health? Sorry.
I think because it's detrimental because it continues to perpetuate the narrative of suffering and silence. While I do think there are times that individual healing takes place, we must do the individual work of recognizing or identifying self. A lot of times we take it on as thinking that we're the only ones that deal with these particular issues. That's time will bring up that shame and that guilt, where we think, or I do think when we're comfortable in sharing our truths with other people collectively, we can become united, liberated, and whole individually as well as collectively because the support is there. Kind of, Sonya, what you mentioned with having your group of women that you can talk to and have the kind of that shoulder to cry on, or even just to
Mm,
release, that also is definitely important. And then we need to recognize and realize that there's healing in vulnerability. A lot of times we
mm,
don't want to be vulnerable. A lot of times that we feel like that's a sign of weakness. But we must be okay with being vulnerable because in order for you to actually heal, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to kind of speak up and say what's happening and what's going on. And again, like I stated, individual work, it does require to take place, but also collectively when we talk about it, when we share about this information in our community, the community can heal as a whole.
definitely. I think another aspect of it, it allows for one to say, "Oh, I'm not alone. Someone else is experiencing this." And I think also with like self care, like it's encouraged it's encouraged people to run to self care, and not face the fact that there is depression that I'm facing. There is, so it's become like an escape, so to say, and it just allows for even more seclusion when it's individualized. So, and it breaks down that collective strength narrative. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a great answer. I like that. There is need, yes, for individual health care, and there's also that collective where we come together and really share. And I think that in healing, especially some of the trauma that we as Black people have experienced. I think a lot of it has to be collective.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Just yesterday, the conversation of reparation came up, and I asked the question, how does reparation work if you're not looking at the trauma that has been left behind? Because money does not solve the problem unless that money is being used
Yeah.
to assist in helping persons who have suffered from trauma.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you talked about, yes, there's need for individual healing and there's also need for that collective healing, bringing it all
Mhm.
together, so that
Mhm.
people across the diaspora who are suffering from trauma can help each other by sharing their stories. I like that very much. Yeah.
Yes.
So this brings me to my next question, which is, why is intentionality and prioritizing central to any self-care practice that you engage with, particularly where the last 2 to 3 years have been so hard globally?
Mm.
And we're talking about coming out of the pandemic,
Mm.
that has been challenging for everyone on the
Mm.
planet, regardless of age, regardless
Mm.
of status in society and your wealth. It impacted everyone.
Yes,
Mm.
it did.
Mm.
I would say it's definitely important to be intentional about practicing self care and prioritizing it,
Mm.
because a lot of times I'm a planner. I like to schedule a lot of things all the time. And if I don't be intentional with planning my self care, I set a routine every
Mm.
day. And if I don't do my exercise and my meditation first thing in the morning, I could tell throughout my day that I
Mm.
did not intentional or set my self care intentional practices. And with doing that, that's something that I look forward to by
Mm.
planning and prioritizing instead of just going up with free-handed or free will, then you neglect yourself and say, "Oh, I'm gonna practice self-care," but then you don't do it. But when you're
Mm.
being intentional and prioritize it by scheduling, whether it's first thing in the morning before you start your day or at night before you go to bed, you setting that's something that you can look forward to, or something that you can prepare and get yourself ready for that day. If you look
Mm.
forward or if you plan it, then it'll be easier for you to be more intentional and to make sure that you fit it in with your schedule. Because I know we have a busy schedule, but it's important to prioritize that,
Yeah.
especially with the last 3 years of
Yeah.
everything that we've been dealing with.
Yeah, no, definitely. I couldn't agree more. I think we've been through a season of uncertainty and definitely just we don't know what's coming next, basically. So for many people, jobs were put on pause, education was put on pause. So it's time to reclaim where we can fully have full control over. And that's how am I doing in my heart, in my head, spiritually? How am I doing emotionally, mentally? So I think just aspects such as sleep, resting, a clean room,
Yeah,
is has it's essential. So we have to prioritize what we have full control over. And yeah.
absolutely.
When you say a clean room, how does that really fit into self care?
Well, yeah, no,
I'm asking.
great question. I think that when we wake up and the space that we create around us, so just arranging, organizing, people find that with organization and cleanliness, basically, it encourages us to start the day off on a good start. When everything is messy, our clothes are around, and things are just not in order. Basically, you're not starting off on a good point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And to add on to that, if you're around a cluttered space, you have to keep in mind that your mindset also is cluttered. A lot of times when I'm in my office, my home office is there. If there's a lot of paper around, I can't think
Yeah.
creatively. I can't be organized with the work that I'm doing because my environment around me at that moment is cluttered. So in order for us to mentally declutter our mind, we have to make sure that the space that we're in is also clutter free. That is a part of self-care as well. So
Definitely, I agree. Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, part of self-care is about having that clean environment and organized environment. They must be ordered.
Yeah.
yes.
Order that you have things neatly piled up or stacked and an organization, and that the environment that you're in is clean.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that affects your mood
Why is
too.
it that
Agree.
I know that there's some persons who cannot function unless there is absolutely chaos, and there's some people who are very creative
Hmm.
who will tell you, leave that where you see it. I'm organized. It doesn't look organized to you,
Hmm.
but I'm organized. And these persons are very
Right.
creative.
That is true.
That is true. No, it's really to each their own. I just, yeah, I just,
So how do you address that in terms of self-care? Can you say that everyone needs to be on the same page in terms of having that kind of the same kind of order?
No, because everything the way that I may do self-care it may be different for somebody else. So what makes whatever, however you feel comfortable with it, you have to find what works best for you. I know what for me, one thing works, and of course I'm clean, but then my mom is like super clean and super organized. So like how you said about the some papers may be cluttered. Mine may be a little bit more cluttered than hers, but I'm like, I'm fine. This works
yeah,
perfectly for me.
yeah, yeah.
But whatever works for you, you have to find the individual self-care practices that you feel comfortable with because there's not really a one shoe fits all for everyone.
Mhm. And I think this talks back into the glamorization.
That's correct. Because I know for me,
Sorry, go ahead, Sonia.
yeah, I know for me, coming from a spiritual perspective, that our view is that you have to be that clutter stops the flow of healthy energy, good energy, positive energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why is good. And I'm in agreement with what you're saying about order and keeping the place clean and tidy. I'm in agreement with that.
Hmm.
Because I know that when around me gets a little cluttered, I become dysfunctional.
Yes.
Very
Yeah.
dysfunctional.
Same here. Yeah.
So that's why I was trying to dig in there so that people understand. Yeah, it's okay to have your mess and your chaos,
Hmm.
but if you're talking from a spiritual perspective and you want to have that clean energy flowing,
Absolutely.
no longer serve us. I'll keep this one out of day. This may come in handy,
Hmm.
and before you know it, the environment that you're in is not conducive to, as you said, creativity in the way that makes sense.
Hmm.
There is no order. And I think that impacts on us psychologically when you look around and say, oh my goodness, and here looks, issues going on. It could be depression or something else going on.
Yes.
And
Definitely.
that's not being addressed.
Right.
And that would bring us to my next, which is to deal with cultural self care. And the question is going to be like this: can you share non mainstream self care practices that would encourage healthy conversations with our audience, such as sexual or reproductive, environmental, cultural self care, and how can we effectively meet these needs?
Um, who- well, I can go ahead. So I really believe that self-care branches into sexual and reproductive health, and basically, the encouragement of women going for regular gyno checkups, especially within the Black community, is quite important. I also believe that with young girls, I mean, I fall into the between 20 to 25 bracket, and I believe that with young girls, it's so important to evaluate yourself where you are in terms of your intimate life. Are you making like are you making moves that respect yourself? Are you making moves that are wholesome for yourself in that area? And I think that this is a place that young women need to evaluate themselves. And yeah, that's my more controversial self-care. Yeah.
And Terry, your take on that?
I absolutely agree with the Cindy on what she stated. I definitely think that's important. That's some of the things that we kind of overlook or don't really want to talk about.
Mhm.
Just like even with the getting the sexual or reproductive health, or making sure that you're going to the doctor for that, as well as just going to your primary care physician for your wellness checks. Also, I would include mental health. That's important. A lot of times we'll think about the body and going to the gyno, but we don't think about a mental health or having a therapist that we may need to
Mhm.
talk to.
Mhm.
Especially in the Black community, when we talk about mental health or we talk about therapists, we're better now. We're having the conversation, but there's still sometimes that hesitancy, like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, I don't need to go.
Mhm.
And just like you go get a physical wellness, having a mental wellness check is perfectly fine too.
Yeah.
That's important to talk to somebody or feel comfortable with talking to someone if you don't have that community within your family or within a group or your peers or friends, to have a licensed therapist that you can talk to, or a counselor, a spiritual counselor that can help you. I think that's important. And just thinking about the connections, because that's another part of self-care. We've talked about the physical self-care, making sure that you're exercising, a proper diet, getting enough sleep. I believe that was mentioned earlier, with the maintenance check of paying attention to your body, and then the spiritual care. What does your spiritual life look like? Are you
Mhm.
praying? Do you meditate?
Yeah.
What is your spiritual connection? The relationships, because that's
Mhm.
important and a part of your self-care. So I feel like
Mhm.
all of this plays a part. We don't need to just look at it one way, but there's various aspects of self-care that
Definitely.
needs to take place. So
Definitely. And just to add, I think also like on that spiritual element, like, if you're part of a church, are you
Last question.
fellowshipping with your church? And yeah, and I think also lastly, in terms of cultural, because it did mention cultural,
Mhm.
are you in touch, with your cultural self? If you're from maybe like the Caribbean, Africa, are you in touch with your cultural self? And
mhm.
what does that look like? And are you at peace with that two-sided self? Because many diaspora, you're in the West, but there's another side of you that is cultural. Are you at peace with the two-face,
Mhm.
persona that you bear? So I think it's quite deep. Self-care branches into that as well.
Absolutely.
I wanted to go back to the part on sex, part of that question that talks about sex. Because I know coming out of the Caribbean, sex for the most part, especially my generation and a little bit older, sex is a taboo
Mhm.
subject. People don't
Mhm.
talk about sex. But as she's feeling tired, coming home to rest. And I said, yeah, you need some rest and relaxation. And she said, yes, and some good sex as well. How does sex play into self-care for caregivers? Is that important? Is having a healthy sex life important?
So on a personal stance, because I'm more spiritual, I don't believe that, but I do know based on research
I want it from a
that a lot of
professional perspective.
yeah, that a lot of people believe that a sex life thrives their day-to-day lives, and a s some form of intimacy, just propels them in terms of feeling good, that euphoria that comes with, hooking up with a hot guy or hooking up with a, beautiful lady who's curvaceous or whatever. So in our today life, a lot of young people view sex as very vital, like a weekly weekly medicine, that gets them going for the week. So I think there is a strong view of this today. I don't know what Terry thinks. Yeah.
Um,
Yes, Terry, let's hear what you think.
kind of mentioning what you mentioned, Sonia, about like with older people, like even some, even in my age group, where it's still such a taboo, especially when we think about it in the church. We don't really want to talk about it. I feel like from a standpoint, it needs to be discussed in a way to that the sexual health is also an aspect of spiritual health as
Mhm.
well.
Yes.
While we look at, yes, that hot guy or that hot girl that we want to be with, we have to also take into consideration, especially the young, when we're ready to be
Yeah.
free, be
Yeah.
mindful of who we are allowing in our space. That's also a part of self-care, because that's a connection that is happening.
100%.
And so if that person isn't taking care of their self in a way that you are working on, you have
Yeah.
to think about that in a way that what you're connected to
Mhm.
also will impact everything that you've been working on.
Yeah.
I feel if we start talking about that in a way of spiritual and soul ties, then they may have
Mhm.
a deeper
Mhm.
conversation instead of just like,
Mhm.
oh, don't do it, let's not talk about it. But we
Mhm.
do need to talk about it and confront it and say,
Yeah.
okay, if you are at that space where you're ready for that, just because on the outer appearance they look okay, but you need to make sure that they're doing that inner
Exactly.
work, because if not, the transferring of those energies also will
Mm.
affect you. And it's
Mm.
important that we keep that in mind when we give our
Mm.
bodies or allow people with our bodies what they do with them and how we respect ourselves. That's an important part of
Mm.
self care as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm. 100%. That is so deep. Yeah.
I love that. I love that response, Terry. I honestly love that, and that you took it into the spiritual realm, because that is a pet subject for me as well.
Mm.
We're more than just a
Yeah.
physical body, and self care goes beyond just taking care of the physical form. You
Yeah.
have to take care of the spiritual form as well. So I really like the way that you brought that in. It is okay to have all the euphoria and all of that, but what's really going on underneath? Because you still
Mhm.
have to be
Yes.
sure that in having the healthy sex, that you're doing it from the right place,
Yeah.
emotionally and
Yeah.
spiritually.
Yeah.
Yes.
So much, Terry, for bringing the spiritual aspect
Definitely.
into that. I'm going to go to the next question, which is what advice would you have for the audience needing to explore individual, family, collective, community care goals, but don't know where to start? Can you share some resources and little tips with our audience on that?
Yeah.
I could start. I would say first, the most important thing, because there's a lot of information that's out there that talks about self-care, and kind of what we covered when it comes to the glamorization of self-care. It starts with us first. Even when we don't really know where to start outside, let's look at what works for us, like the things that you used to do. Maybe you didn't have time to do it anymore, whether it was setting aside some time in a day to read a book to kind of help your mind get away from what's going on in the world, or having those moments, even if it's just 5 minutes a day where you're meditating or just a quiet
Mhm.
time, journaling, things in that nature, things that you enjoy doing, even if it's a TV show. Now we have to be mindful of some of the shows that we watch to make sure that we're not feeding our minds the negativity. But I know we want to stay up to date on the news. So things that are out in the world or what's going on in our local areas, but news a lot of times is negative. So check that temperature of how often that you're paying attention to what you're looking at or what you're consuming. If you're spending too much time on social media, or if you're scrolling and your energy feels low, then that's something that you need to start with. But I think before we can go to the resources of what's outside, let's kind of pay attention to what we need for ourselves inside our bodies or inside our minds. And then if we can pay attention and remember, like, oh, when I worked on that, or when I did this puzzle, or when I drew, it made me feel good. Start there. Because whatever makes you feel good, even if it's cleaning up a space in your room or in your office or somewhere in your home where you're setting aside, this is my space that I can sit and be comfortable with, I think that that's important. Just trying to pay attention to the things that you once enjoyed that you may not have time to do now. That's a start. And then once you figure out kind of the things that you used to work on that you had pleasure in, or it made you feel good, making you feel like an upbeat spirit, then you move to other things. But there's plenty of resources out there in regards to self-care practices. But I think first it starts with you individually.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, and I think just some reflection on what works for me can be a good start, or even research, because there's a lot online nowadays on where can I start with my self care. So yeah, I would just add those two nuggets in. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the next question if we're complete there. And that question is, what is that question? How can reflection and journaling support self-care choices and practices?
I feel like reflection and journaling, that's one of the things that I just enjoy doing. I've always done as a child, but it helps me to release. It helps me to kind of write out my day. There's some days that even when I would go back, I'm like, okay, that day bothered me, but I was able to release it and write it in my journal. And then go back to reflect, like, what was going on, or why did I feel this way? Instead of me, journaling helps me to process my emotions in a way that I don't react that in a or react on someone that could bite me later down the line. If I
Mm.
write it in the journal, if I help myself release those emotions and things that I'm feeling, and then I can go back to reflect and be like, okay, well, what was happening? How do I feel about that? And now what can I do moving forward? That's one way that helps with the self care, because you're still protecting yourself, taking care of you, but you're also releasing it. Even if you don't have that moment where you feel comfortable with sharing what you're dealing with someone else, by writing that in that journal or releasing that, that gives me that moment to reset. And I'm able to, if I had a long day at work and I'm tired, write it out, and then I can go to bed because it's not in my mindset anymore, and I can rest myself. But then when I need to go back to reflect and look at it, it's still right there, but it's not stuck in the mental.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
I like that, and I find that journaling and being reflective really helps me as well. But my greatest fear of writing stuff down is that someone would find my thoughts and read them, you know. So in as much as I like to write my thoughts down, I'm always looking for places to hide, what I've written, so that no one can find it.
Yes.
Because sometimes the things you write can be so intimate,
Yeah.
Mhm.
so intimate. So I'm always looking for somewhere, where can I hide this?
I agree. I definitely have like a little special place for my intimate journals that I'm like, no one needs to see this but me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what are some other forms of creativity that one can use in terms of self care? I mean, journaling, I would
Mm.
be creative, but I'm sure there are other mediums that you can
Mhm.
Mm.
to be you can use for self care.
Right.
To keep your mind free and
Mhm.
flowing. If you have any suggestions
I
on
would
that,
suggest, like we stated, kind of journaling is definitely my go-to. Another one I would recommend is, I know a lot of, there are some more that are doing it now, adult coloring books. They're coloring. I love to color.
Mm.
That's another. I'm not an artist. I cannot draw,
Mm.
but coloring, it's more of a mindfulness type of thing that I'm
Mm.
just allowing myself to kind of, if I
Mm.
don't feel like writing, coloring
Mm.
helps me to kind of release that. Another form, if you are an artist, therapeutic art is another form where you're listening to some music
Mhm.
and painting, or however you have that
Mhm.
creative mind to just release. And it
Mm.
could be your art piece that you are letting the anger or the sense of calm come
Mm.
out into the on that canvas. That's another form that I think that's more of the creative space. Or and even one is another one, like creating a collage. I know we're in the new
Mm.
year and everyone's getting ready for, or those that are creating vision boards. That's
Yeah.
another form,
Yeah.
where you're manifesting or putting that vision in place, where you're putting those pictures and writing it out. That's
Mm.
another form of self care as well. So,
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
okay, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, no, I think another way is like knitting. Personally, like I knit. I know it's my grandma taught me how to do it, and I just find myself doing it in moments of high stress.
mhm,
And also learning an instrument. Like if it's the keyboard, saxophone, whatever you find yourself, leveraging to. So yeah.
absolutely.
I like that. I like that. And as you were speaking, the thought came to me that sometimes, a little isolation
Yeah.
from everything and everyone
hmm
can do a lot for you.
Yes,
Yeah, definitely.
yes,
Just shutting out everyone else. And coming out of that, I want to know from you, how often should persons who are given mental health care to others, how often should they take breaks for themselves, and
Mm.
should they also go and get professional? Should we engage each other
Mm.
professionally? Let's say I'm a spiritual
hmm
practitioner, you have an issue. Should you come to me and say, Sonia, look, this is bothering me. Can I have a session with you? Should we have professional care as well as caregivers?
Absolutely. Yes, I do believe that. I'm a firm believer. I believe that even if you have a therapist, that your therapist should have a therapist. If you are a life coach or if you're a spiritual practitioner, you should have someone that you also go to and release. Because
Mm.
while in the helping professions that we're in, we're working with people where we're taking on things that they're bringing to
Mm.
us, but then
Mm.
we also have to keep in mind that while we're helping them, we have our own things in our lives that we're dealing with as well. So who do we go to release? That's important to make sure that you
Mm.
are being intentional in setting that time to, whether if you may not need to see that person or talk to your spiritual practitioner
Mm.
or therapist every week, maybe once a month, at least set aside some time that you're able to kind of release and reset to make
Mm.
sure that you are doing what you need to do to make sure that
Mm.
you are in the health or in the self-care, the mindset space
Yeah.
that you need to be to help the ones that are coming to you. Um,
Yeah.
because if we don't, then burnout happens and then it's a trickle
Mhm.
effect.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because I'm here speaking, I'm thinking, if I'm not well, my clients can pick up
Yes.
on that.
Definitely.
If someone comes to me and I'm carrying stress and trauma, I think
Mhm.
they can
Yes.
Hmm. I think if I can add, definitely refueling would be a way of loving on your clients as well,
Absolutely.
indirectly, because if you're whole within, then you can present the best experience for your client. So I feel like it's a double effect. It's for both teams, you know. Yeah.
I agree. You got to find your own wholeness. You got to find your place of balance so that when you radiate and you put that energy out there, it's clean energy. And I think primarily, regardless of how you toss the coin, that's what we're working with, energy.
Yes.
And how you show up for the client is
Mhm.
very important. It's like you're not going to go to the office and don't take a shower and make yourself look pretty and stuff. So if you're having that trauma going on the inside, that's yucky too.
Yes,
Mm, mm,
That's
it
yucky and it
does.
shows.
That's powerful.
Yeah, and I personally would not want to go to a therapist who has issues. And when you walk into the room, you can feel that tenseness. I wouldn't want to be in that person's
Right.
presence.
Yeah.
I think I would cancel that session.
And I'm looking here at the screen, and the
Yeah. Yeah.
plan has left a little message saying, movement so good for self care.
Mm, mm,
Mhm.
And I absolutely like that because I love to dance. I don't know many people in the Caribbean who can dance.
Yes.
So I'm gonna ask you, lovely ladies, where can people find out more about your upcoming projects and keep up to date with what you're doing and get in touch with you?
Absolutely. You can follow me on my Facebook page, on my business page. It
Did
is,
did I drop out for a
uh-oh.
minute? I'm just gonna repeat that. Where can persons find you
Um,
if they need to find you? What projects do you have
absolutely.
coming up or events you have coming?
Mhm. Yes. I have a Facebook business page. It's called the Know to Thrive Collaborative Coaching and Consulting. That's where a lot of my updated events or virtual sessions that I'm getting ready to implement for the new year will be posted, as well as they can follow my author page on Amazon, which is T Floyd Writes, and that's TEEFLOYD Writes. That's where you'll receive updates of my upcoming books and journals that I already have published that are there. So, and they're self-care personal development journals.
Amazing. Well, you can just find me on LinkedIn. It's Simbi.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. As Simbi is my first name over there, and Sebageni, Sebageni. Yeah,
Hey,
that's my main point of contact.
well, I would like to thank you, ladies, for being here. This was great. I've learned a
Thank you.
lot. I have learned a lot and realized there's still a lot more for me to learn in terms of my own personal self care. And I hope that all those other persons out there who are mental health caregivers or any other type of caregiver have benefited from the discussion here today. And with that, I would like to say thanks and have an awesome 2023.
Uh,
Thank you.